Hello, everyone. This is Inamul Haq from Bangladesh, and we have today with my friend Philip Shah. He is from Canada. As we know that we do this East-West every month. We missed the last month because Phil was very busy with his farming. So we have come back just before the Christmas, and Merry Christmas to all of you. Probably will be listening over the Christmas this particular show. And this month, again, we are trying to talk about COVID because 2 years ago, we thought COVID is here only for a short period. Now, almost we are into the second year, and COVID is still here with us with new names, new varieties. And the last one with us is Omicron. So, with that here, we were trying to find out how this world is going to look like in terms of the economy, because that is an issue that I think we should be all thinking about it. The way I look at it is that average economic growth has gone down -5%. Countries like Bangladesh probably is a lucky one. China is also a lucky one. But average economic growth, we have actually still have a positive economic growth. Our growth rate has fallen from almost 8% to 3.5% this year. So it's still positive, but a significant decrease in the economic growth. And that actually meant loss of jobs, loss of livelihood for many people. The world is predicting that by the next year, what will happen is that our poverty rate will go up. People are living almost like by the day. And the number of people who are struggling to get out of the poverty is going up because lots of people lost their jobs because of COVID. Not necessarily, many countries like Bangladesh eventually gave up on lockdown. Not as brave as Queensland in Australia, who held up their lockdown for 20 months. And only recently, probably yesterday, they have relaxed their lockdown after they have completed 80% of their population into COVID vaccination. Countries like Bangladesh, we have done about 50%, 51% of our population as of now. Countries like Canada has done roughly about 80%, 82%. US has done about 72%. So there is a large variation. But at the same time, countries in Africa, there are some countries has not even started vaccination. Some countries less than 3% population vaccinated. So there's a huge variation across the world. And as people and scientists have predicted that this is a disease, which is a global disease, is going to travel. So if the countries who are left behind are not vaccinated, the disease is going to come back in different forms. Omicron is a very good example that it has been again threatened in the global world. So with that in mind, we thought we would discuss this for all of us. And let me hear from Philip Shah. Phil.
Thanks very much, Anamel. I'm Philip Shaw from Dresden, Ontario. It's nice to be back after a month. I was busy in the harvest fields, but this COVID thing continues to confound in many ways. I was incredibly interested in chatting with Anamel about the economic cost of this, and he talked about a decrease of about 5% in economic growth rates in a place like Bangladesh. I assume China is similar, and even though you had mentioned that maybe they haven't done as poorly as once thought. But also, too, there's the specifics regarding the problems that we had. I brought this up before we started taping. About a year from now, are we going to be in the same place that we are in now? Which is not, we're in a much better place because of vaccinations. But still, we don't see the end of this. In fact, life is getting somewhat more complicated. Just the other day, or a couple of weeks ago, Canada and some Western countries barred flights from South Africa because they were transparent with regard to naming the finding and the Omicron variant in that country. And since then, we've opened up flights to those countries again because it's a mug's game. Like Omicron is everywhere, just like Delta is everywhere. And about a year and a half ago, when Enamel and I were doing this, we said that everybody has to be vaccinated in order for everybody to be safe. And even though our vaccination numbers are much higher, large parts of the world, like Enamel said, aren't even vaccinated. And if you think about it, it gets rather difficult to think about simply because, well, how are we going to do this? The virus doesn't get tired. We're all tired. I left Enamel's place in 2020, and then this COVID came. I was lucky I got to visit. But here we are almost 2 years later, and we're still in the same spot. And really, I don't know how we're going to do it, because if you look at the economic statistics, first of all, there's the economic growth, but then there's the unit cost of how much it costs to vaccinate. How much it costs to vaccinate individuals. You take a country like Bangladesh, where about half of the people are vaccinated at least once, 160 million people. You take the continent of Africa, where some countries haven't even started, and we need to get those people vaccinated too, or we need some type of new technology to come along to take this on, because the cost of it, as a global community, we don't want 5% lower economic growth rates, just as a general rule. We don't want that, because that means people lose their jobs, wealth decreases, and the standard of living is not as good. So we don't want that. So how is it going to be done? Well, I really don't know, but I know that in some of the more developed countries, the cost of vaccine is a little bit higher than in less developed countries. But still, we have to find a way to get it done, and I'm really at a loss how this is going to be done. For instance, I went to the doctor this morning for something unrelated, and I just asked her. I said, "How are we going to get by this?" And she said that, one of the reasons we have this problem is simply what I've already stated, is that all the world is not vaccinated, and these variants come from places where there's not a lot of vaccination, so the virus can mutate. But she still said that the vast majority of hospitalizations and deaths are with people that are unvaccinated. So having said that, even the vaccinations that we do have in this world, as imperfect as it is better than the alternative where we were about a year and a half ago, where we were just talking about how to avoid it. But I know, Enamel, you have a few statistics and you have a few ideas on what the individual cost of this is for the different countries. So maybe you could extrapolate on that for a few minutes.
Yes, thank you, Phil. I think this is when I was looking at the data, this is very interesting. Average high-income countries already spend roughly about $205 per capita to deal with this disease. And remember, in the whole world, we have 270 million people affected. 50 million people died so far. So that's 53 roughly. So that's a large number of deaths. So forget about this death issue, but just on hospitalization and vaccination cost, per capita cost is 205. And least developed countries like Bangladesh and many others, have only spent $3 per capita. And that is the reason that many of the countries has not even started vaccination. And that is one of the biggest trouble they have. So as you said, I think on average, just to give you another idea, on average, average spending on health in these smaller countries are very low. So not only that vaccine issue, but if these, we are lucky that many of these countries were not as affected as many of the developed countries. Even India has a better healthcare system. They were also troubled with the outbreak of Delta variant, if you remember. So countries like Africa as a full continent is left aside. People have not looked into it. WHO has been flagging this issue that, look, the world is so linked with each other. You cannot avoid the disease unless we all take care of each other. So I think that is also a very good lesson for the world today. Even though many people thought that I will vaccinate my country people and we will survive. Answer is it is going to be impossible.
Yeah.
The Omicron itself is an eye opening for many of us. Many of us have thought about it, and now you started realizing that you cannot leave your neighbors and even any country within anywhere, because the world is a global world. It's very difficult to isolate each country. We know, forget about isolating individuals. Countries cannot be isolated. So I think it is time for the global world to think about it. Otherwise, this problem is going to persist for longer time. And if it persists for longer time, my worry is that many economies are going to collapse. You see, the American inflation rate is very high.
Yeah.
In the last 40 years, it is higher compared to the last 40 years, higher than that. And that's going to haunt countries and economy of the world. It will weaken. The longer the COVID stays, it will weaken the fiscal ability of the government to fight it out. So I think it is high time for the global world to think carefully and say, look, let us go get everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible. And there should be a global effort on this in this particular regard, regardless of country, region. Phil.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know too. Like that's always been somewhat of the answer, but we also have done an East-West commentary on vaccine hesitancy, and that will always be there. But you're right in what you say, like with regard to just the economic costs and how this will affect the economic growth in all these other regions. Take a country like Argentina now that is negotiating its debt with the IMF, and other countries in South America and Central America, and of course Africa too. I really don't know the answer. I see big problems ahead when you combine all things together. Maybe we need some new technology, whatever that might be. But how much per capita do we spend on the military in this world? My gosh. How much do we spend on defense and guns and things like that? Certainly this global world can do better than what we're doing now. And if we start focusing on getting more penetration of this vaccine into the regions of the world that need it, then maybe at some point we'll be able to get by this and live in an endemic world and be able to deal with it in the future. But the way it is now, we still don't have it right.
Thank you, Phil. This is a very, I think this is an important conclusion for all of us. And despite what you mentioned about vaccine hesitancy, I think countries are becoming ready for vaccination. Now, many countries are waiting for vaccines to arrive. And it is important despite all the vaccine hesitancy issues, I think it is important that we drive together, the whole world, and make sure that everyone is vaccinated so that, as you said, it becomes more of an endemic rather than a pandemic. And that will probably bring normalcy in our daily economic life. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this commentary.
And thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to everybody.